Okay, so before we get started, let's do this. Let's all introduce ourselves. So I'm going to let Vivek give an introduction because he's now doing something completely different. He's one of the startups that we're going to talk about, right? So Vivek, why don't you just share what you're doing and what you want to get out of this session?
So, I'm currently doing a few things. So one is I'm doing investments in India. The second is I have the startup Kinetic Glue, which I'm very excited about, and you'll hear a little bit more about that space because I think it's one of the largest trends going on in the IT environment out there. And the third is that I'm currently a professor at Stanford, where I'm actually looking at a lot of biotech stuff going on, and that's been pretty interesting as well.
Great. So let's do this. Let's have Vivek walk us through his presentation. I think they have handouts, or
yeah, there's handouts.
I think they're handouts. So let's keep it very informal. Stop us anytime if you have questions. Let's walk through that. Then I'll make a few comments on my vantage point as on the new technologies, and then we'll get into some discussions. Vivek?
Really happy to see so many folks here with such an interest in helping Indian startup companies. I really think that what we've heard over the last day or so is so true that the Indian ecosystem is now evolving from having done services to now going into innovation, technology, product, etc. And so it's great to be a part of that journey, and glad that all of you decided to share in that. So what I've done with these handouts is what I'm going to do is really walk through pretty quickly with some of the headline trends. My guess is that you are all pretty familiar with some of those. And then I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper on what we're seeing on social, and why that is actually becoming a rising agenda on many CIO plates. So with that, let me start with this. Does everybody have this presentation that kind of starts with this? Great. So, if you look at the first page, again, as I said, some of you may have already seen this, but, that business computing is now increasingly happening through tablets and smartphones. And interestingly, tablets and smartphones that are not owned by the company, but actually employees are buying themselves. And what that's doing is changing the dynamic and the relationship between the corporate IT department and what were its so-called captive consumers so far. So it's becoming much more open. The second trend, which is the consumerization of IT, continues in that fashion, which really is individuals holding out not just the platform that they're using, but also the applications that they're using as being very linked with the applications they're using on the consumer world. And so, for example, I had lunch with the head of SurveyMonkey, and he was talking about how it has become kind of the de facto survey tool that people are using in their personal life and in their private life, Evites' personal life, as well as in their business life. And so what we're seeing again is that the line between consumer and employee, the line between personal and professional is beginning to blur. Trend 3 is the networked enterprise, and which talks about how social is becoming a much bigger influence in how enterprise systems are designed to work. And I think that what we're seeing here, and you can see that there's, executives are chiming in with a lot of interest in this space. And I think that what we're seeing here is, frankly, only the beginning. Because what is going to end up happening if we take into account the first two factors that I talked about, which is blurring lines between who owns the asset that I see the information on, and blurring lines between the application, what we're going to see here is that social will become the peephole to all enterprise IT. In other words, no more boring reports. I'm actually only going to look at reports where others have already commented on. And as a CEO, rather than seeing the report that the CIO says I should see, I want to look at trending reports. I want to see which report most people are looking at and commenting on, because I can bet that that's where there's action going on. And so I think that all of the enterprise information is going to be presented through the social peephole, which is the social hearth around which employees are gathering. And people are going to say, if I want information, I want to be able to share it, I want to be able to share my comments with it, and I want to see who's looking at what and who's commenting on what. The next trend is social intelligence, which really is that when you have enough of this going on, you will actually create a treasure trove of data that doesn't even exist today. When you have all of this information on who said what, about what, to whom, this will begin to capture for you patterns of communication that will be invaluable for internal use and for how you interact with your extended enterprise, whether, Dinesh, it's for you with your supply chain, or you as you're looking at morphing your technology, or looking at the demand chain as well. So as a result of this, what you can see is the consumerization of technology, the consumerization of platforms, social and social intelligence. We're beginning to see a really rapid rise in the application of social within an enterprise. And so far, the jury has been out in terms of, is this the future email? In other words, when email first came out, everybody was like, gee, I don't know, I'm not sure it makes sense. Do we really want to put it in everybody's hands? And then it became, well, we can, but we're not really quite sure what the ROI is, and should we really only offer it to a few people, and then became, now universal? Or is it going to be more like knowledge management, which has kind of always been this great goal to have, kind of, someday in the future, we will all have knowledge management, but never really actually transpired. And I think that what we're seeing is, it was a very interesting article in the McKinsey Quarterly about how there's actually now substantial benefits that executives are seeing coming from social. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit now, dive in a little bit deeper on the social side. Because what I wanted to say is that social is a completely different organization model. And I think that it is as sweeping a change as the first time an enterprise adopted the military model as being the hierarchical flow-down way by which work is shared. So if you think about it, since sort of mankind exited the hunter-gatherer phase, there's been that single flow-down model. And now what we're seeing with social is, it is an emergent model. In other words, what emerges as a social personality of an organization, what emerges as a social character of an organization, is completely unpredictable. And that scares the heck out of everybody who's thinking about implementing this. And so what you're seeing is a completely different model. So I want you to think about emergent and, maybe the cloud, since we use cloud in a different way, but I am actually talking about the physical cloud in the sky, is a classic emergent model. If you think about a cloud, water molecules enter into the cloud and leave at all given times. And the cloud has no characteristic of a water molecule, and yet consists only of water molecules. It has its own finite presence, and yet it is different from the constituency that it has, which is water molecules. And so what you have is an emergent phenomena that has its own shape, size, characteristic that has nothing to do with the constituent phenomena. There are many examples like that. There's waterfalls, and then in the organization itself, what you end up seeing is different kinds of personalities emerging. The second way that this organization model is different from the old army model is, the old army model was all a hierarchy. It was all about, you report to so-and-so, you report to so-and-so, you report to so-and-so. In the social model, particularly if you're an HR person or an IT person, the things that change is now you're looking for nodes. You're looking for people who are connected. And there are two kinds of nodes that you have to recognize as you think about this social connected world. There are one which are the highly networked people. And you, an IT manager, need to know who they are, because they're very important. They influence what this emergent looks like. And the second is the people who have the weak links. So we've all heard about the 6 degrees of separation, which is, you can sort of track from the US president to anybody sitting in this room. In 6 steps, a link. And the reason why the 6 degrees of separation works is because of what are called weak links, which is the random links that you didn't even know existed, but you actually find your way through that. And so as you think about going from a hierarchical environment to a node environment, you've got to think about those 2 nodes. But the third thing, that the way that the socially networked enterprise is completely different, is it operates on social rewards, not economic rewards. We're all used to the fact that economic rewards are the way that organizations work. You give them money. These, by the way, are switched around, should be the other way around. But you give people money, and now you're, and that's why they get motivated. Now what you have is, You actually have social rewards where people actually do something for social credibility. When people were asked in knowledge management to assign themselves a expert status, they actually did not do that. But they gladly call themselves an expert in social environments because they are looking for that social credibility. Similarly, the old environment was extraction. You had to extract work out of people. This is cognitive surplus. You know, there's a term I picked up from this author called Clay Shirky, where people actually contribute, just like people like MR and Sangeeta are contributing with their cognitive surplus. So a socially networked environment actually works in a much more cognitive surplus ways. So as a result, what do you see? What's the reason for doing this? Innovation thrives in environments like this. This is not knowledge management. All innovation happens when groups of people that are able to bat ideas around, that have a diverse background, share this. Speed, you get much faster speed. Stability. Network systems have a characteristic called graceful degradation, that they never collapse, that they always have, just like our brain is an incredibly networked organ. If there is brain damage, people have a graceful degradation. And scalability, which is that today, if you look at the IT services companies that are now reaching a stage of 300,000, 250,000 employees, they are finding real limits to this hierarchical model. And the only way to actually have scale beyond a certain point is to be able to create these emergent social networks inside the company that allow self-management. So, enough about sort of what it is and what makes it. How do you actually roll this out? And, many CIOs that we've talked to have struggled with this because there are only two kinds of networks. They're dynamic or they're dead. So there is no partial success in this world. And it is of great, great value for people to understand, how do I make that social network that I launch in my company of value to my company? And so what we've done is, we've put 5 factors here that are just kind of thought starters. But these are sort of, compressed learnings that we've had as we've been around for 3 years to think about how do you actually make a social network successful. So the first thing is, don't view it as a technology problem. It's a whole new organization design. The reason that it's really important to think about that is, people say, hey, look, I can think of this component, I need to put in feeds, or I need to put in, some sort of a social network, connection software. That is not it. This is an organizational change, and we heard many conversations earlier as people were introducing themselves, that it's all about the change management, particularly in this. So I think that the way that CIOs can team up with HR and organizational experts is of critical value. So for example, Future Group is a big customer of ours, and the fact that they have people like Devdutt Patnaik as their chief mythological officer makes a huge difference in terms of thinking about how do you view this as a social change, not a technological change. The second is, start small. eBay became a huge platform for trading anything, but it started as a way to swap Pez or chewing gum dispensers. So whatever you want to get started with, make sure you have a purpose, recruit the right early users, populate it with content. Start small, have a very specific, finite problem to solve. And start as an outsider. So one of the things that we found as we've talked to customers is that the first thing the CIO says, okay, let's integrate this into 20 different internal systems that I have. And the reality is, the minute you do that, the whole nature that I was talking about earlier of this being based on cognitive surplus, of this being based on emotional intelligence, not rational intelligence, goes away. So start this small, start this in a focused way, and start it as an outsider. There's plenty of time to integrate as you go along, but let this thing thrive initially as a small, focused outsider. The next is, make it easy to use. I mean, it has been amazing, trying to work through the limited bandwidth that people have for cloud-based applications, the amount of access controls that people want to provide. They're like, okay, we are willing to do this only for this strategic business unit. Well, these strategic business units work with other people. Well, we're not ready to pay for that. Well, we're like, okay, fine, we'll give it to you for free. No, but we don't want them signing on, because then they will bring on their friends and they will bring on their friends. That's not the way it's going to work. So you've got to make sure that from the ability to be able to provision this, it's got to be really simple, network access, enrollment, and forgiveness versus permission. It's amazing as we've talked to even sort of large technology companies. We talked to this large biotech company, and they were like, well, we love this idea, but you know what? Every post, we want to have somebody in HR read it before it gets posted. And we're thinking, now this is going to be a challenge. I don't think you could physically read every post before it gets posted. So I think that this whole idea about making it easy to use is so simple, but yet very important. Give it time and freedom. All emergent properties are layers of structure and usage that define itself. In other words, structure emerges from the usage. The way that a network system works is the linkages come out of the usage. So you can't just mandate it. You got to give it time for structure and usage to become layer after layer after layer for it to be successful. And finally, leave the policing to the community. So many of our customers, the first thing they want to do is to say, okay, how do we police this? How do we make sure we don't have this kind of a problem? One customer talked to us about how they were worried that the first thing that people would get on this and use it for would be to complain about cafeteria food. So they said, how can we make sure that there's no discussion on cafeteria food on this platform if we roll it out? And our suggestion to them was fix the cafeteria food. I mean, how much more do you need to hear before you do that, rather than trying to really kind of get contorted about preventing any conversation on cafeteria food. So not to take too much time. Happy to take any more discussions, or we can have, if this is an item of interest for everybody, we can put that on as a topic. But certainly, there's a lot of learning, and what we've learned is, this is really important. Its time is now. And there's a right way to do it, and there's a not right way to do it. Thanks. Mark.
I want Vivek to come back and lead a discussion on innovation and how we're going to work with the startups you're all going to see later, right, in general. So let Vivek lead that discussion.
Thank you. So, I think that what we've got set up, I think, is a pretty good slate of companies you'd meet. And but I'm just really curious, as you think about how you engage with startups. I thought some really interesting sort of give and take here. I heard about many interesting ideas around mobility and how we could work with Indian startups. And then interestingly, when we were talking about the enterprise social media space, the mind instantly went to, let's go to salesforce.com. And so it sort of went exactly in the opposite direction. So it's kind of like so I think that it's really important for us to figure out this group, particularly as you think of yourself as discerning buyers, where are the areas where you can get value from working with Indian companies, and where you think you should actually go somewhere else. So I'm just curious, have any of you already worked with small Indian startups, been one of the first 10 customers of any Indian startup? So would you mind sharing some of your experiences?
We were with the product called Orangescape about 2-3 years back, and I think Suresh was here a while back. And it's basically a BPM tool on the PaaS model, so suited us very well in terms of building. However, I think some of our challenges were in terms of response time, in terms of feature functionality, upgrade speed of response. And and I think that was where we had, so the team was really not geared up or equipped to support us at the rate at which we wanted to, improvise the product. And that's one area I think they could have worked on.
Great. You had some experience as well?
Yeah, we did work with a couple of young entrepreneurs, and what we did was to build up certain applications for the business. And there was small startup product companies, so what we did with them is to make it a more global product so that the SAB Miller globally could use it, as well as extend their footprint in a larger workspace. And what has happened eventually is that they went to Europe. They did sell the product to one of our subsidiaries, and they were very happy with the developments, and they did a lot of changes on that product as a standard one. So I think it is very important for the startups to actually work with the CIOs to understand, first of all, the business need for where they are coming in, and grow the product to a larger business processes that they would like to cover. Because it could not be specific to a particular company, but they can actually go into a larger space on that. So I think that's been quite a bit of experience with us, and which was very helpful for them to also grow out from the Indian market space to international market space.
Great. I think there was another comment back there. Yeah.
I would just relate about small incidents that there were a couple from IBM, and they left US and came to India. They were sitting on some private algorithms with them, and they happened to be addressing in-memory analytics. That was one. There was a dedupe engine available. Somebody asked about the data deduplication and data cleansing. And they didn't know what to do with it. They were just sitting, and in 3 months, 6 months, they set up a small shop in Koramangala here. Nothing happened. Suddenly something happened with, let's say, a telecom company. There was a government stricture available that all the telecom practice owners, Reliance, let's say Airtel, Aircel, their data has to be deduplicated. And within certain time, this report has to go to TRAI. And this regulation was so tough that if you don't do it, the licenses can be cancelled. And we happen to be knowing this couple there, so we just went out and then said that, look, you claim that you are sitting on something. And trust me, it just was amazing. For next 3 months, they didn't know how to serve. The company went from almost 3 people to 30 people, 300 people. Now, about 80% of the data of all telecom companies in India is going through their algorithm and the package that is available. That's a small example. And then actually what probably good thing would happen that the big companies would start looking at them. So I think IBM is more or less trying to grab them back. That's one. And there's another thing which probably I wanted to share, and then I heard that somebody is from the cell phone manufacturing here. I don't know. I would like to know him. I just came out to seek the copyright permission from the institute. That there's a concept available, which is very simple. You must have read the story that 20% of the Indians are suffering from diabetic and blood pressure. We also know that this country has got tremendous amount of yoga practices. There has been a very, very long established faculty available that yoga was quite well practiced in India, and that's it. There's a kinetic energy formation that kinetics can be converted into, let's say, electrical power. Simple thing. ISC, there's a paper available, and I'm part of that paper. I would like to pass in happily through Tapan and CIO to the right person. You just mix these 3 things. That means tell people to practice yoga because there's a diabetic and blood pressure, there's exercise available, which is practiced very well. And while you are doing it, your cell phones get charged. So look at healthcare, look at the battery problem of the cell phone, the kinetic energy. These 3 things are available. In silos, all the 3 things are available, and we are having it locally. I just have to really unless this and give it to somebody who is a cell phone company, and then if they would like to buy this idea. Thank you very much. I know that. That just link them together. Very, very well said. These are all available, no doubt. Nothing out of bound, but then just mix the A, B, C together, give it back to society.
So let me just, maybe I can share with you some of the learnings we've had in terms of being a startup from the Kinetic Glue side, working with CIOs. And I think that, what we have found, which might be, helpful is that generally speaking, so we targeted Indian companies. So what we thought is that, since the whole idea here is to be sort of one of the first movers in the enterprise model, and yes, we actually had a product out before, Salesforce.com, and they did in fact visit our site frequently before they launched their product. But but the fact is that if you think about it, Indian CIOs have actually been amazingly receptive to new technology, new ideas, and Indian companies. I think that having said that, there is no free pass being an Indian company. So I think that the CIOs, and I think all of you reflected here, is that there's got to be a reason why it's you that I purchase from. So I think that the risk appetite is there. I think that the demand for value is there. I think that the questions that we've had that many of you may have asked or probably could be asking is what happens if you as a startup don't exist anymore? So one of the things that all CIOs are struggling with is that I want to take this chance, but how will this work? And I think that, sort of a leaf out of the valley, if you will, is that most of the software companies at least have been able to say, we'll put the source code into escrow so that should we ever go out of business, that source code is yours and now, you can work with that. So I think that one of the concerns that we've had to work around has been sort of longevity. The second concern that we've had to work around has been around connectivity to or integration with other applications. And I think that that is something that we have sort of worked with customers as well as pushed back on. If you remember my earlier presentation, what I talked about is that particularly in our space, integration is actually not a great thing early on. And I think that that is one of the things that Indian companies, at least our view has been, have not been as agile in terms of working with systems integrators and trying to create some of the integration side of it. So I think that that's something that that we've also discovered as we've gone through this. The next thing that we've discovered is around the security aspects. So I think that the perspective we got from Indian CIOs who actually work with startups has been that there wasn't such a high focus on data security and infrastructure security. And so I think that from the Kinetic Glue side, we had to work really hard to kind of offset that, particularly as we had a couple of financial services companies that were early customers that had not only their own internal security concerns, but they also had to worry about regulatory concerns. And so I think that as you think about working with Indian startups, it really is around making sure that that particular aspect of it has also been addressed. The last question that we've had come up as people who we have worked with Indian startups before is scalability, which is that, I can see how this works for a 500-person unit or a 5,000-person unit, but what happens if this is a success? What if I want to roll this out into, the entire organization? Show me the capability that you have, or how quickly will you have in being able to make this into a 10, 20, 100,000 person enterprise. And I think that that is another question that sort of CIOs have asked, and we've had to resolve our way around that as well. On the dark side, in terms of questions that we've had, that in some sense are never addressable, I think one is a concern around the fact that I bought this from some other vendor in some other fashion before. And at least in our business, for example, the single biggest factor that we found was that virtually every Indian large corporate owns this Microsoft product, SharePoint, that nobody has used. And when they talk to them, they're like, finally, I can use that product, And so as a result, this whole idea about how do I overcome a resistance that's on the back of, something that I invested in the past, or how do I justify the fact that I've invested in this in the past for so many years, never used it, and now I want to go try this? So that's a question that I don't think the Indian startups can answer, whether it's for a our specific thing, SharePoint, or its many equivalents. And the second dark side thing that I would argue for that we have seen is that at least in one particular instance, because this is a startup starting out, you're one of the first customers. You end up seeing a lot of the sort of what happens in the kitchen stuff, And so we actually had one company that actually decided that they were going to go do this themselves based on all the learning that they had. The bad news is that they launched it, it never worked, it was sort of a bit of a dud. But there's a temptation that, we found that I have not seen in the Valley where, when you work with a customer, the customer's like, well, I think I can do this myself, because that hasn't worked, and we haven't really seen that work here either. But that's kind of the second part of the dark side of the working with Indian startups, if you will, or any startups. But that's kind of the experience from our side in terms of how, things that have worked and questions that have been successfully answered on working with Indian startups. Coming back to the innovation side, I think that the beauty about the companies that I think we have sort of seen here, and a couple of the folks that I've met, including the OrangeScape folks as well, is that there are a lot of interesting ideas. And I think that what we have seen generally is a lot more technology ideas than application ideas. And I think one thing that the CIO Council can do, NASSCOM can do, and really everybody in this room can do, is being open-minded towards those ideas and trying to then figure out how can that be a useful application for you. And I think that that is something, whether it's the verticalization of that application, whether it's, making it more practical, I think that's something that all of you can uniquely be positioned to help with.
I have a point, Vivek.
Yep.
I'm sure we are all aware of this Gartner's Magic Quadrant, right? All that stuff. I spoke to a couple of, I met some startups and I saw their product much better than some of them listed in the Magic Quadrant. So I asked them, what is your problem? Why can't you be listed? They said, look, if I have to call Gartner and get this evaluation done, it's going to cost me more than what I've invested in this product. Okay, so that is a pretty big issue for all Indian startups. I could tell
That
you
is very true. Yeah.
So is there a way where maybe NASSCOM can do it, or some body where we could look at an evaluation of Indian startups and classify them as whatever
What a great
between
idea.
the 4 quadrants.
Great. Yeah. That's a fantastic idea, and I'm really glad you brought that up because Kinetic Glue faces this exact same issue, which is, Indian companies are put together by a lot of, sort of very smart people come together, build a product, and, there makes no sense for them to go hire Gartners just so they can be featured.
See, as CIOs, I think we would get much more confidence. You'd see, like from a technology point of view, maybe I would trust the person, no problem. But then when you have to take it to the certain governance, and your governance says that you need to take certain stakeholders through it, etc. So there it says, okay, where are they listed? Are they in the leaders or a visionary or whatever? What is that? So they say, hold on, this is an Indian company, but they are good. Okay, but why don't we still go with somebody who's listed? So I think that's a point which
I wish Suresh had not left the room, because it's a great idea and NASSCOM should definitely do it, but I don't think Indian startups should shy away from that, because I know Orange has managed to come in there. Top 10 or the leader in that quadrant as well. So maybe he can do some sessions for other startups.
No, so actually it's not that hard. I mean, the process is pretty clear. Gartner has a very clear process. It's just a cost-benefit analysis, which really is, do I really want to go spend that money to go do it? But you're right, you can. Yeah. That's a very.
Have a session around building a sales mindset, the mind of startups. And why I'm saying that, to just take an example, is VivekPaul, who's the CIO for LG, was here 2 years ago. The product conclave, he was here 2 years ago. And he told all of the startups in the showcase, I think that year there were about 15, there were a lot of startups that were showcasing. And he told all of them to write to him. Nobody wrote to him. He was actually interested in 7 of them. He wrote to them. Out of the 7, only 4 wrote back. And out of the 4, only 1 really took the sales process ahead, and only 1 of them actually managed to close some business with them. So it's a fallacy that CIOs don't have time for these people. These people have to, they used to be wooed. I'm saying that openly. They used to be wooed by the MNCs and the large corporations all over the world. So we need to build a mindset where our startups understand that, and if they're looking for business from them, they need to know how to woo these people. It's very important.
We have a session this year
Oh, great, okay.
on sales, marketing,
Great,
alliances,
great.
pricing.
Great.
Because we listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think it's very important for NASSCOM to do that, because I think from a CIO's perspective, they're very cost conscious. And they don't want to go to a big league product company to invest some lakhs of rupees and crores of rupees to get a product into the company, and people don't use it within the organization. So they would like to invest it in small pieces and with entrepreneurs, so that they can keep the costs down and at least make sure that the entrepreneurs can work. I think it's very important, and I think that fallacy should come out from the entrepreneurs, that the CIOs don't want to invest. They would definitely like to invest on those things, provided, as rightly said by Paul, that if we have the source code in the escrow account, it makes a lot of sense for the organization to be safe and secure, because that's very important for the organization going forward.
Are other stakeholders, mostly from the finance, to say that, look, we've invested so heavily, do we really now look at another other option of the cloud? However, having said this, we do see opportunities where if there is no, integration requirement with our cloud, with our private cloud, an application which says, okay, look, there could be some kind of an application where what we call as the sales audit, sales merchandising audit, etc., where it doesn't really have to integrate with our ERP systems and systems. That's where we see opportunities for the cloud.
So integration is the bottleneck.
Yes, yes.
Is what you mentioned.
One more area on the cloud, this is not technical as such, but a service which an organization like NASSCOM could provide is if there could be a certification of the various offerings on the cloud. Because I think Europe has made some progress in that area. So if you go to EuroCloud, you'll see lots of people are working on that area. I think in India, that has not yet happened. So cataloging of all the service providers, then certification on certain parameters, that might be a very useful service for people to use before they use any of the service providers.
Yeah, private cloud and virtualization has really picked up. A lot of organizations deploy different solutions, and that has kind of in a growth phase. And if you look at some of the products and solutions that are available in an OPEX model, which CIO would definitely be interested, is also picking up. Something like, let's say, encryption solution. If I don't have to kind of have a management server in my premises and completely operate in an OPEX model, probably that interests me. So different solutions on the OPEX model, which is available to cloud technology, is also on a growth path. So that's also another interesting area.
So are you seeing, Manoj, within the Aditya group, a lot of adoption towards cloud, any of these kind of things? Are you seeing that?
See, there are a lot of internal cloud and virtualization that happens in all organizations. So that's still happening. But looking at the public cloud, it's people are slightly skeptical to go for critical services. But there are certain kind of services and solutions which are available through cloud, which is on OPEX model, like just I mentioned, the encryption service. So that's available as a complete OPEX model. Let's say I don't have to host a management server in my premises. I don't have to kind of capex on that. So that is an interesting model to look at. So there may be other services which probably will interest people.
The Aditya Birla Financial Services Group, Tarun Pandey, I think you know him well. They've done some implementation as well. In fact, we profiled them in one of our cloud computing.
Yeah, that's a private one.
Yeah, because it's financial services. So
Yeah.
You can't really have so many insurance subscribers, all their data in the public.
Yeah, you cannot put that kind of data, and right now everyone is skeptical. That's a quite critical infrastructure.
Anything else on the cloud? Let's talk a little bit about big data. I'm sure between beer and cigarettes and all this, you've probably got lots and lots and lots of information, right? So both structured, but also, like Vivek was saying, once all the social stuff takes off, there's going to be all kinds of unstructured data in a company, and then weblog data coming from your websites, who's coming into the websites. So any projects going on within your companies to handle big data? Please. Go ahead. I think it's on.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a whole lot of voice data. And we also have a whole lot of non-voice data, which is unstructured data. We do a lot of text mining and a whole lot of predictive analytics around such things, read the sentiments, emotions of the customers, and translate that into business rules. And the whole web journey of a customer is managed using these predictive analytics that we have been using. We're doing this big time for many large clients of ours in the US and the UK, and we operate in that geography. And I think that's something which is where we are transforming ourselves and saying we are a technology organization. We are focusing on big data big time. But Vivek, to take on, I would be very interested to talk about the social thing. I wanted to mention something that we are looking at. 95% of our employee base is less than 30 years old. And for us, an employee engagement, social interactive media within the organization is an absolute must for employee retention, employee satisfaction, diversity, all of it. So I would like to have some discussions around that if later.
Okay.
I think the first thing Padmaja said is truly amazing, because we've been looking for a B2B example of analytics and data warehousing, which really we've been struggling ever since that whole diaper next to beer example from Kmart came out. So I think really we should profile this case study, because we hardly have any real B2B examples of big data and analytics. On the second front, there are many solutions, right, including Salesforce, Chatter, and things. Have you looked at?
More from an internal enterprise engagement. So something that at least I've conceived and presented was something around starting to put your status and, translating that into grievances, into suggestions, trying to take an employee pulse at a point in time on ESAT and ESAT index. Internal, absolutely. So anyway, yeah, we'll talk about it. So there are a lot of things that of interest for us in that space. I think that's one of our biggest challenges.
Dinesh?
Yeah, we had this challenge of trying to figure out what the problem in the supply chain is. In the sense, every day we have about 40 million records of transaction data. That is what got manufactured, where we close to about 2,000 active SKUs across 100 odd factories, across 100 odd warehouses, and serving about 2.6 million retail outlets. So essentially, that amount of data, we want to figure out, okay, what's our fill rate? If our fill rate is certain thing, where the problem is. So we have right now, in the sense, we are implementing, in the middle of an implementation of an in-memory analytic thing to handle the big data. But I think the challenge still remains is how do I pull the data out of big data to kind of get it into the memory itself. So that itself is creating a problem. Again, integration, yeah.
I think, the biggest challenge also that we face is a very long, unstructured data that comes from the market. Because the kind of, when you have an SKU, a standard SKU and a standard description of a product within your organization, the same thing is not reflected back when you try to get the data from the market. And that's where the data cleansing activity is a very, very big task for the people who wants to actually capture the data and put it in the right place. So data cleansing and integration of those unstructured data becomes a big, big task for an organization. So that's again something that we are still struggling, and with the Indian market, with the different languages, with the different things that they keep in their record books are totally different than what we would perceive in our own minds.
In data, yeah.
I just wanted to ask the CIOs if your brand managers are pushing you, saying, what's our digital reputation? Give us some metrics on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, saying what people are talking about us and how you're managing that.
We've kind of formed a small cell of a couple of people who are like, Facebook and Twitter, and they're just into that, so they just keep kind of analyzing it and seeing, okay, what they're talking about our brands and everything. If there's any whatever feedbacks come up, the report is sent to them on a daily basis. Actually, in fact, there's a small cell of three people whom we have taken.
Do you use any tools like online reputation management, which also tells you whether
not at this point in time, because from our end, we the digital, we don't do much of digital marketing. Okay, but I think if we've started doing it, but I think that'll also come up maybe next year or so. That should become a priority.
So I don't have a lot of
talking is not secret. No. It's all other FMCG. Basically, if you look at it, ITC, we have 23 product categories. Only one is cigarette. So 22 is.
Just one question about the big data. Typically, if you are looking at big data, are you looking at big data stores running on relational technology, or also open to non-relational graphing and other techniques also is what you are looking at or open to? Because these are the new paradigms when it comes to the database. The whole problem was created with relational and table kind of, fractured kind of databases. If you just have one big unified store, the problem itself, the cause itself is not there. And then the analytics always works better on something like that.
My view is on that is that I think the relational database was more to do with data integrity. So like every record or every transaction that you capture should be, in its entirety. But this in-memory or the other, what we're talking about, associated database models and everything, where you compress the data and then load it into memory, that is something to do with the final consumption of the data. It is essentially to say that, okay, how do I see all that big data into maybe one dashboard or a couple of dashboards, and then I can do, can it help me in decisions?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm libertarian at heart, so I feel like everybody has to earn their own right to exist. And so I think that I do want to make sure that, I don't want to lose Padmaja's point that if, on the other hand, the startups are not being responsive or not doing what they want to do, there is absolutely no reason why you should be risking your business to make something that is not working work. So, everybody's got to earn their way. I'm sorry, somebody, back there has been wanting to speak.
Yeah, a couple of points, actually, and I have worked with and interacted with a number of Indian startups, right? I think, like you said, lots of great technology ideas, not so many application ideas. I think one of the big challenges that I've seen, across the spectrum of Indian startups, they don't think big enough, right? Which is why, let's say if you went to the showcase yesterday, you had 3 companies, and I think all 3 of them had great ideas. Not one of them was asking for more than a couple of $1 million. I mean, and with a couple of $1 million, you can't take any of those technologies global, right? So, and to that point, I mean, I think any of those ideas in the U.S., those startups would be standing up there, especially, with some of them actually having validated their concepts, they would be standing up there and asking for 20 million, right? And that's why they end up being underfunded. That's why they can't go to Gartner. That's why they cannot put up the right infrastructure for sales and marketing. The other thing is execution, right? I think, and I hate to say this, but a majority of the Indian startups suck. And they suck because of jugaad, right? Because they're not funded well enough, because they're not thinking big enough, they take shortcuts. Right? And I think NASSCOM's got to kind of step up and put a more active mentoring program, to help them with the visioning, to help them with the, with the process of execution, right? The diligence and execution, the rigor that is needed while delivering to large organizations, right? We've seen many a product which has been somewhat successful locally fail the moment you cross the shores and went into Western markets, just because they didn't have the maturity of execution, right? And and I think NASSCOM can really make a difference on both those aspects, by putting together some kind of a mentoring program for startups, to think along those lines.
Thank you. I know we're out of time, but we had one question back there, Mar, if we can take. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of bring out another breed of startups, which I haven't found anybody talking about yesterday or today. And these are companies which have basically a presence in US, and they have been doing outsourcing work out of India. They have a whole lot of experience now, and now they want to kind of look at the domestic market. They haven't been doing that because the Indian CIOs were not ready to accept them. Today, the mindset is changing. Those companies don't have any of the shortcomings which have been highlighted here. So maybe you could actually focus on those for jump-starting on the whole process of Indian startups.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. This has been such a great session. So thank you all for this session. Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Emma. And we'll head you to the lunch session.